Hi, in today's video I'm going to show you how to install the latest version of xmonad and xmonad contrib 0.17 using Haskell Stack. So if we come across to this section here, what's new, this is a lowdown of the changes and the new features that have been added. So these are some of the selected features and improvement. We've got stuff, a status bar, redrawing the screen after you've used things like xrandr, window swallowing, clickable workspaces. So I'm actually on xmonad 0.17 on this machine now. Everything is working perfectly. I didn't have to make any changes to my config. So what I'm going to do is come across to this section here, which is installing xmonad. And this is the documentation that we're going to be using, and it's got instructions for Debian, Fedora, Arch. And what I'm going to do is come across to a virtual machine and run through the setup, because there's one thing that's actually missing on this page, and that's how to get this working with graphical login managers. So if you're using something like Ubuntu, you usually have like was it GDM, and there's an issue that you've got to fix by creating a symlink that I'll show you. So what I'm going to do is come across to this virtual machine here, unpause it, set it to full screen, and this is my notes. What I've done is I've actually installed this 3 times. I've installed xmonad using Haskell Stack on a virtual machine. I then installed it on a MacBook Air 2011 running Ubuntu 2004, and finally this machine here, which is a Dell XPS 15 2019 model running Ubuntu 2004. So first thing that we need to do is is going to depend if you've already got xmonad installed. What you need to do is actually switch to another desktop. So if you've got Ubuntu installed, you're going to have the GNOME desktop installed by default. So you want to boot into the GNOME desktop, or if you don't have another desktop and you've only got xmonad installed, install something like DWM, which doesn't have any dependencies, because we need to boot into another window manager or desktop to do this, because we're also going to be uninstalling the apt version of xmonad. So first of all, what we want to do, follow along, is we're going to crack open the terminal. Let me just open, have I got urxvt here installed? rxvt, yeah. And not picking up my settings, did I? Must have forgotten to copy my settings across, so let me just do that. Okay. Whether urxvt should be xresources, xinit. Oh, well, not to worry, I'll just use the regular terminal. So what I'm going to do is follow on these steps. So the first thing we need to do is actually install the dependencies that we need to build this. We're going to install git lib x11 dev, lib xft dev, xarmera-dev, lib xrandr dev, lib xss dev. So you can just come across here and copy that and paste it into the terminal. If I can remember what the keyboard shortcut in this terminal is. There we go. Figure that out eventually. Yep. So we're going to first of all install these dependencies, and then what we're going to do is create a xmonad directory and change into that. If you've already got an xmonad directory, you can skip this step. As I say, I'm setting this up on a fresh machine so you can see the entire process. Okay, it's doing stuff there. So next step, create the xmonad directory and change into it. Okay, we can see pwd. we're now in the xmonad directory. So what we want to do now is copy our xmonad configuration file across. Now, my xmonad configuration worked out the box perfectly. I didn't have to do anything. That might not be the case for yours if it's more complicated. So your mileage may vary, as they say. So I'm basically going to copy this xmonad.hs file, which is my existing config, into this directory. So I'll move it rather. Move desktop. xmonad.sh into there. So we've got the xmonad.hs file there. So the next thing that we want to do, we're going to clone xmonad with git. Now you can either clone head, or you can clone a specific version, like a particular branch, like it's got here listed 15 or 16, but you put 17 in there. But what we're going to do is copy this, clone the first repository, xmonad, and after that we're going to clone the xmonad contrib repository. Okay, we're getting there. So what we need to do next is add local bin to our shell path. So I'll just wait for this to finish, and if I run vi .shrc .zsh and I come down this section. So this is what you want to add to your ZSH or bash RC. If the home local bin exists, then add it to the path. So we've done that step. So what we need to next do is install Haskell Stack. So we do that by running sudo apt install haskell-stack. Yep. And this is basically the tool that we're going to be using to build xmonad and install it. And it's really easy to use. There's another method using Cabal, which I've used previously to set up xmonad on FreeBSD. But this is the recommended version way to do things. And it's really simple. Okay, so after that, what we need to do is actually upgrade. I should have, this step here, stack upgrade. We need to run stack upgrade. And that's going to download some stuff. So some of these steps take a little while to actually download the packages. Okay, and here what we have is a prompt saying, should I perform the file operation using sudo? This may fail. Try using sudo. Yes. Okay, sudo file copy worked. So we've done that step. So after that, what we need to do is make sure we're in the big xmonad directory, and then what we do is run stack init. So stack init, and what this is going to do is it's going to create a YAML file in this directory here, stack.yaml. So basically, what this will do is this is used for the configuration. So basically, all we need to do now is actually run stack install. We run stack install. Now this is the bit that takes some time, but you can see it's not a difficult process to actually go through. And basically what this does is it's going to go through, download some stuff, and then start downloading a load of Cabal packages. And then finally what we need to do is create a, if you already have xmonad installed, after we installed all this, we're going to uninstall xmonad using the apt version. Then what we do is we create a desktop file, a session file to that will show up in your graphical login manager. So you can basically select xmonad and log in. And then finally, the missing piece of the jigsaw that took me a while to figure out is what happens is when you install xmonad using apt, it installs into user bin xmonad. And when you install xmonad using Haskell Stack, it's installed in your home directory.local bin xmonad. So what happens with the graphical display manager is when you have your xsession file, it typically says something like execute xmonad. What happens is that it looks through the system path, which would be, user bin for all the binaries. And because it's not installed there, what happens is you try and log in using a graphical login manager, and then it comes back straight to the login screen. And it took me a while for the penny to drop. Okay, it's not looking in the user's path. So as you saw, we created a up here. We added this to our shell config. So xmonad is installed in home local bin, and the system doesn't search that file path for binaries. So basically what we do is we create a symbolic link from our home local bin xmonad file to user bin, and that creates a symbolic link at user bin xmonad that points to home local bin xmonad. Once you've done that, the graphical login manager will work fine. So that's one thing they don't actually mention in the install process that had me, stumped for a bit, and I thought something to do with the xsession file, but in fact it was basically the symbolic link that you've got to create. So as I say, this is the part that takes a little while. What happens is it's basically creating an isolated environment and installing GHC. And then what it's going to do is it's going to download a load of Cabal packages and then configure them. And while it's doing this, what I'll just do is come down to this section here. So we've installed everything. And then what we do finally is we need to make a desktop entry like this. Desktop entry, name xmonad, comment, execute xmonad, type xsession. And that will go in user share xsessions. Right. And once we've actually got everything installed, we've got xmonad installed in user local bin, we can actually remove our existing xmonad install that we installed with apt. And on Ubuntu, the name for the xmonad contrib library is actually libghc-xmonad-contrib-dev. So we basically have to remove xmonad after we've installed this version, because otherwise they'd conflict. And this is why we need to boot into another desktop, because obviously you can't uninstall xmonad while you're logged into xmonad, because that's sort of the equivalent of trying to do brain surgery on yourself. It's not going to work. So that's why you need another desktop to boot into rather than xmonad. And then finally, what we do is actually we create this symbolic link. So sudo ln-s from the source, which is our home directory, that's tilde /.local bin xmonad user bin. Now, you would sometimes you would think that the symbolic link should be user bin xmonad, but then that sort of creates a sort of nested link. So the link would actually be user bin xmonad. So that's why we leave off the name here, because basically what that will do is that will create a symbolic link at user bin xmonad that points to this directory here, local bin xmonad, which is where xmonad is installed using Haskell Stack. And so, as you can see, this stage here, what it's doing is it's downloading a load of Cabal files. And what it's going to do, it's going to go through this section, and eventually it's going to sort of come through and sort of check out all the modules for xmonad, and you'll see those sort of go by. They'll go through this progress. So you can see these are some of the xmonad things going through, and I think it goes through all these ones, and I think there's a couple of hundred it actually goes through. And I did see some sort of things coming up, some errors. It doesn't seem to have affected anything. So we'll leave that to chunder away, and then basically once that's done, all we need to do is create this desktop entry and copy it to the correct location, which is user share x sessions. And then again, what we would do is we'd install xmonad with apt. And if you, the other thing to note is if you run sudo apt purge xmonad, it will actually remove your existing xmonad.desktop file from user share x sessions. Okay, so this is what I was talking about. This is the section I was talking about. Yeah, it's several hundred. So as you can see, it's going through 185 of 297. So you can see these are all the libraries being installed. And as I said, this doesn't actually take that long to do. You can do this in about half an hour. As you can see, I've been going about 17 minutes. So the progress is going to depend on your computer's speed and your your download speed as well, how fast it downloads and how fast it builds stuff. So this will get to the end in a second or two. Okay, and it will give this sort of like error because it hasn't picked up that I've got that in my thing. I'm pretty sure. Let me just check that I'm actually should be in the. I haven't rebooted. That's why it's still stuck on bin bash and it's not finding the zsh that config. I've added it to my zsh file. Okay, so finally, what we need to do is create this desktop entry. So if you've already got xmonad installed, you can run xmonad sudo apt remove xmonad and remove that, and then you can run sudo apt purge xmonad libgxc-xmonad-contrib-dev to remove any configuration files. But that will remove your existing desktop entry. So what we're going to do now is come across to the desktop. And I thought I had copied that. Let me open. Oh, it's still bash. So cd desktop word copied. No, that's right. So in my Git repository for xmonad, what I did was upload my xmonad.desktop file. So here we have the desktop entry, name xmonad, comment, execute xmonad, type xsession, and save that. And we'll save that to the desktop. The save should be down the bottom right. Don't know why it's up at the top here. It's stupid. Okay, so we've done that. So now basically what we want to do is copy this file to user share xsession. So sudo move it xmonad.desktop to user share sessions. Okay. Right, so the final step to get this working is to create a symbolic link to user bin xmonad. So you need to also need to sort of fix the text there, but you get the gist. You need to create a symbolic link to user bin xmonad for your graphical manager. Otherwise, it's not going to boot in and return to login. So copy that, paste that in, and if we now run ls-l user bin monad, is it not copy the whole thing? Or, yeah, user bin xmonad. Yeah, you can see here that's a symbolic link that's pointing to my user directory.local bin xmonad. So that should be the final step. And there is a section in the documentation about a custom build script, but I haven't actually gone into this as yet. So what we'll do now is we'll log out, and we should have a section down here, xmonad. Okay, what I'll just do is xrandr-s 1920 by 1080. Bang. Fix the display there. So there we go. I haven't actually got the wallpaper set. Cafe. Oh yeah, that's it. I didn't actually copy my wallpaper across in this virtual machine. That's why there's no wallpaper there. But if I bring up Rofi, you can see I've got Rofi here on Firefox. And what I'll do is just wallpaper. There's a site here that's got all the Mac wallpapers. So what I'll just do is come across Tiger, download the 5K version. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to convert this after it downloads. I'm just going to convert this save image as. Okay, I'm going to install ImageMagick. So sudo apt install ImageMagick. Password wrong. Yep. And I'm just going to use ImageMagick to resize that wallpaper and just show you the, wallpapers working basically. Go. Okay, CD desktop. Okay, so convert. It's not actually called ImageMagick. Convert in-file geometry. And the way you do it is 1920 by 1080, and then the sort of caret symbol. Call that Linux. I think it was .jpeg. Let me just check what the just check what the file name is on the other computer. Hang on. okay. Well, I think it's called. I thought it was called linux.jpg, or was it PNG? I think it might be PNG. Okay, make that b.config config wallpaper. Let me just check the Linux PNG. Yeah, okay. The linux.png to .config wallpaper, and if I now run that baby G script and come across, there we go. Finally, we've got our wallpaper set. So let me just come across and put this into a different tiling mode. You can see everything's working. I can put this into grid. Fine. DSPM mode. All those. So everything's working identically. If I just come out of this and pause it for a second, you can see this is xmonad on my physical hardware. Exactly the same. Yeah, I've got my scratchpad, my terminal scratchpad. I've got my Emacs scratchpad. So exactly the same setup on this virtual machine here. Okay, and if I just come across and launch Firefox, and let's go through those steps. GitHub, Colin Wilson, Cerberus, just hide that up there, and we'll just come back across to the monad notes. So that's the desktop file. I'll put linked to this and the documentation here. And as you can see, I previously did a setup on using Cabal, but this is using Stack. So basically the steps we went through: we installed the dependencies, we created the config xmonad directory and changed into it, and then copied our existing xmonad.hs config file into that directory if it wasn't already there. Otherwise, the notes on the install page recommend just starting with a really basic xmonad. After that, we downloaded the xmonad sources, xmonad and xmonad contrib, using Git. And again, you can check out a specific branch if you want. Then we edited our shell config file to add the local bin to our path. So basically edit your ZSH or bashrc file, add that to it and source it. Then what we did was we installed Haskell Stack. So this process is just really simple. It's really nice and easy to use, as you've seen. We installed Haskell Stack. Then we have to upgrade it. And then while we're in the xmonad directory, we run stack init, and it basically creates the package.yaml. It creates that stack.yaml file. And then once we've done that, basically we just run stack install, and that's it. It does everything. And then finally, the final two steps were creating the desktop entry and copying that to user share x sessions. And again, if you've got xmonad already installed, you can uninstall it like this. And the final secret source was creating the symbolic link. So sudo ln-s ~/.local bin xmonad /user bin. And that creates the symbolic link. And that's what allows the graphical login manager to actually pick up the location of xmonad, because it's not going to search the your user's path for the binaries, it's only going to search the system path, which is user bin. So that's basically the setup. And if we just come across to xmonad, so again, this is the site, xmonad. This is the what's new section here. Basically, with changes that have been added, and some of these new sort of features about status bars and EHW desktop. I'm using EHW desktop, and I didn't have to change anything. It's all working absolutely fine. And these are the sort of improvements. Easy motion. A new module allows selection of visible screen using a key chord provided by Vim Easy Motion, which I haven't heard of. If you have a look at this, this is Vim Easy Motion. If you're a Vim user, you may know about that. Then we've got a xmonad prompt for org mode, which is an Emacs note-taking thing. It's more than just a note-taking thing. You can basically use it to manage your dot files and write all your dot files out, which is something I've covered in a previous video. You've got new hooks for the status bar, a new module for the status bar, rescreen, and I think this basically helps with if you're plugging in monitors, it will sort of like auto detect, and sometimes if you're using a panel, you kind of have to applications don't sort of, how you can hide your panel like this. Sometimes after plugging in an external monitor, you have to actually close the application and restart it for it to be able to bud up full screen, and this is supposed to deal with it. Util hacks, selection of hacks, like a fix of full screen behavior of Chromium based applications when using windowed full screen, window swallowing. So basically what that does is, if you say if you've got a terminal open and you open a video, for instance, with MPV, what it does is it actually hides the terminal that you started MPV from. So rather than you having a terminal running and then MPV, it will hide the actual terminal and just show MPV. You've got clickable workspaces and sort of lots of other stuff down here. So that's the changes. And then if we come across to the documentation and installing xmonad, this was the section we followed. These were the notes I went through, and again, these were the dependencies. And if you're in Fedora or Arch, that's how you install them. And again, these were basically all the notes that I went through in the documentation for this video. And here's how you install Stack on Fedora or Arch. But as I say, I was just showing you this on Ubuntu, and the reason we actually want to build this manually on Ubuntu is because this has just come out, and it's not going to be in the Ubuntu repositories if you're on a long-term release. I don't think, I saw a video by DT on DistroTube, and he was saying it's not even in the Arch repositories yet. So this is why we want to install it using Stack, is because that allows us to install the latest version of xmonad with all these new features on Ubuntu 20.04 or any other distribution, regardless of whether it's in that distribution's repository. So basically, if you're on a long-term release, you might have to wait a couple of years for this to show up in the repository. So it's really easy to use Haskell Stack and to set it up, get it going, much easier than Cabal, which they also give instructions for if you'd rather use that. But as you can see, basically, once we've basically once you install the dependencies, create the directory, copy your config, clone the Git repositories, install Haskell Stack. We upgraded, then we initialized, and then we just ran stack install, and that's it. That's the entire install process. And again, the only other thing you need to do is actually create the desktop entry and the symbolic link, as I mentioned. Once you've done that, you're all good. As I said, my xmonad config worked perfectly. What you might want to do is what I actually did, as if you can set up a virtual machine and install your operating system. So if you're running 2004 or something, do as I did and set up a virtual machine and go through the process with your xmonad config, and that way you'll know if there's any issues. If it doesn't work, it's in a VM and you haven't messed up your actual desktop. And you can go through and you can tweak it and you can find out what the issues are and fix it before you actually install it on your physical hardware. So as I said, what I did was I installed this in a virtual machine, as you can see. Then I installed it on my second old laptop, made sure it was working on that. And when I was installing it on the on my old MacBook Air from 2011, running Ubuntu 2004, I came into the issue of I'd got everything installed. I'd copied the .xmonad.desktop file to user share X sessions, and xmonad showed up as an option in the graphical login manager. But what happened was when I tried to log in, go to a blank screen, and it would return me straight back to the login screen. And so after a bit of thought, I sort of thought, well, maybe it's not searching user bin xmonad for the binary, because it's just searching the system path. So if I create a symbolic link, can I trick it and get it to log into xmonad? And it worked. So that's the solution for graphical login managers. You can also use xmonad.rc to start xmonad. And I had this, I think this was from I think I've actually copied this from FreeBSD, my FreeBSD sort of section. So that's why it's got user local bin xmonad. So I should change that, fix that path. But what you can actually do is you can execute the shush agent and then xmonad if you're logging in with xmonad.rc, and so that will start your shush agent as well as xmonad. So that's just a little tip. But obviously, if you're using xmonad.rc, you can actually specify the direct path to xmonad. You might have to put in the full path, like home, users, your username, .local bin xmonad. But if you're using xmonad.rc as opposed to a graphical login manager, that's what you would basically do. And there's some more stuff down here on the install about building with Cabal if you want. And there's a thing down here about a custom build script, which I actually haven't got into as yet. I just wanted to get everything installed and working, make sure the config was working. And as you can see, absolutely. So you wouldn't know which ones if I come across here. So this is physical hardware, and this is virtual machine. So you can see basically identical. So I've just got exactly the same setup with minimum of fuss in about half an hour. Really easy to do. And it basically installs it all inside a sort of isolated environment. And actually, it seems to be a bit nippier than the version that I installed with apt. It just seems to be a bit know, it was a bit more kick in it. But I said all my, everything's working absolutely fine. Launchers, hide that. Got the NM applet, so I've got my network display. I've got Tint 2 up here. Basically, all I had to do was to the VM, I just copied everything into place. Obviously, on my physical machine, I already had everything installed, all the applications that were mentioned in my xmonad config. So I just basically ran through that procedure that I've shown you, booted into xmonad 0.17, and it all worked. No errors, no fuss, nothing. So if you want to get the latest version of xmonad, using Haskell Stack will actually allow you to do it on any operating system. Well, obviously not Windows and Mac, but any version of Linux. I should imagine FreeBSD as well. But it's basically a really good way to get all these sort of nice new features that they've got, because it's the first update in a couple of years. And I said the process is really simple, and it's got instructions for Debian, Fedora, and Arch, and it'll take you half an hour at the most. Go through, unless you've got a really complicated configuration file. So you might want to try this out in a virtual machine first, just to make sure your config is working. Once it's working, you can follow the same procedure on your physical hardware, and it should just be fine. It depends what you've got in your xmonad config. If it's got loads of stuff in it, then yeah, it may may a wobbly somewhere along the line. But if I come across to my xmonad config, yes, so I did see some stuff mentioning the layout combinations changed. Some of the stuff about layouts have changed, and some of the stuff about EHW desktop had changed, but nothing in this config has thrown an error so far. So yeah, EHW desktops, EWMH desktops. So these are all the things that I'm sort of importing. My variables for defining the terminal, border width, the workspaces. This sections here is for desktop notifications. There's my startup hook, starting the applications like URXVT is my terminal, Emacs, SXHKD, which is a sort of keyboard daemon that runs in the background that lets you remap keys, which is really useful. That's a really good program for remapping the keys on Linux. And I'm also installing doesnt, which is notifications, NM applet, which is the the applet that shows up in your taskbar for network connections. Then I've got my layouts defined. And you've got a couple of layouts. Manage hook for managing how different applications should launch. So like I always have MPV launch a sort of centered little window that I can then move about or pick full screen. And then there's finding the key bindings, scratchpad, and then the main. So there's only how many lines is it? 190 lines. So it's not a big config. So yeah, it's really easy. I haven't had any issues. as I said, I've now installed this on 2 virtual machines and 2 bits of virtual hardware, and I haven't had any issues on any of them after I'd sort of figured out that little thing about the symbolic link. So, as I said, try it in a virtual machine first. Make sure your xmonad config works, and if you need to fix it, and then you can install it on physical hardware. So I'll put links to all this under the video, but again, there we go, in the virtual machine. There we go. That's it in the virtual machine. Put it into grid. Full screen, grid, tiling, BSPM. You get the picture. But as you can see, you wouldn't know which one was the VM and which one was the actual real thing on physical hardware. So yeah, works perfectly. There's nothing I've come across of giving me any issues. Full screen, thing works. I didn't have to do anything, didn't have to change anything in my config. So I'll come back across to the right screen. Yeah, I'll put links to xmonad, the new features page, the install, and my notes on GitHub. So that's how you can install xmonad using Haskell Stack on Linux and probably on FreeBSD as well. Really easy to do. So it's only going to take you about half an hour, but as I said, you might want to fire up a VM and check that your xmonad config works without any issues before you move on and actually install it on physical hardware and uninstall xmonad using apt that you've already got installed. So that's the lowdown on how you can get the latest version of xmonad without it being in your distributions repositories. Because as I said, I don't even think this is in the Arch repositories as yet. And you know, it would basically install it in a isolated environment. You know, it's actually seems to be a bit nippier than the version with apt, as I said. So that's how you can get it all set up. Won't take you long, and it'll give you some new features and bug fixes as well.